Welcome back to Thinking Cap. My name is Benji, and in today's video, we're diving into a crucial strategy that can either make or break your season: FPL Premium Swaps. We're going to explore what this actually is, how to perform it, and when to swap those big ticket attackers to maximize your points and climb the rankings. Thinking Cap activated. What are premium swaps? Why do they matter? And what are the pros and cons of using this strategy? Premium attackers are the backbone to any successful FPL team, but obviously they do come at a pretty hefty price. There are 8 FPL premium attackers in the game right now. This includes 3 forwards, Isak, Watkins, Haaland, as well as 5 midfielders, Salah, Palmer, Saka, Son, and Foden. FPL have priced these players so expensively because all 8 have a lot of routes to points, are talisman for their clubs, and often you'll be looking at captaining one of the 8 most weeks during the season. And if you're like me, who's looking to do exactly that, you need to plan ahead of time and structure your team to provide yourself with the best captaincy options as much as possible. So by premium hopping, you're going to gain a lot more points from captaincy than the regular Joe across the course of the season, which is one of the main factors to why it's been so popular in recent years. Another benefit of premium hopping is that you'll be able to use almost all of your free transfers on changing premiums, which is where the big point swings are. Think about it, right? Would you rather be using your precious free transfers on Calvert-Lewin to Liam Delap, which will earn you, 5, 10, 15 points max across the next 5, or are you going to use your transfers for a Salah to Palmer, which if you did it in game week 6, it would have given you, 19 points? So for me, the second option really is just the more optimal strategy. I will be using my personal transfers on those big point swings, which is what I really want. And I think it's just, you got to swap FPL's big boys if you want to get those big rank gains. Now, the big downside to the premium swap strategy is the risk that a premium burns you after selling them. So on the flip side, if you had Palmer in game week 5 and you sold him for Saka in game week 6, you would have gotten burned from Palmer's 25 pointer, with Saka only getting 3 points. So there is risk that swapping the big guys does actually backfire on you. But either way, I am of the belief that this is the optimal strategy going forward. I'll be using 90% of my frees on these premium swaps, pushing for the big gains and providing myself with the best chance for captaincy success across the season. So now that we've discussed what premium swaps are, and now that you're a little bit more familiar with the concept, let's talk about setup. Should you have 2? Should you have 3? Or should you even be reaching for 4? Well, it's tough, right? I'm currently set up in a 2 premium setup, Salah, Saka plus Haaland. And in game week 6, when I wildcarded, I was thinking to add Palmer in the team, but I did drop him last minute because I decided I wanted the long-term squad depth instead. Do you want the long-term squad depth going forward? Do you want a good defense, or do you want your money in the big boys up front? I will go out on a limb and say now that 4 premiums is just way too much. It's going to be virtually impossible to survive with 4 right now, unless you go without Haaland and Salah for the season. I'm just not sure about that as a strategy. I think it's okay to go without them for a couple weeks if you're really chasing and you don't like their fixtures, but I still think that it's not the optimal strategy going forward if you're looking at that from a long-term perspective. But if you do force 4 in, it's going to be really hard, and your team's going to be very reliant on 4 premiums to return every game, because that's where most of your money is. So I do think 2 to 3 is the right amount. I'm looking to move to 3 myself, but it is down to personal preference and what you really do feel comfortable with. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to touch on some of the most popular premium setups, and then I'll run you through the kind of personal premium swap paths that I've created for each structure across the next 10 game weeks. And guys, everyone's going to have a different amount of transfers. You won't have the same amount of money in the bank. And what I've done is I've kind of broken it down into a more basic way so that you can come back to the video, in game week 12, 13, 14, and you can see who I was recommending in my premium swap path and see kind of where the landscapes change. So I think it's going to be really valuable. And you got to think that you won't be able to do all of the swaps. I know that, right? I'm just showing you in your structure or something close to your structure what move you should be looking at. But even if you can only do, 2 out of 4 swaps, that's still a lot of chasing upside. You're still chasing a lot of upside. You're still engaging in a lot of risk. And have a look through what you like in the video and perhaps think about it for your own team, let's do it. The first structure I'll be taking you through is the template setup of Saka plus Haaland in a two premium structure. If you're in a structure with two premiums, Salah Haaland, Saka Haaland, even Palmer Haaland, this swap path is one for you. And this one is for people looking to stick with two premiums across the next 10 weeks. You don't want to get to that third premium. You don't want to have to shift around funds or sell Haaland. And you only want to use, a couple transfers on swaps, a couple on other areas in your team. So this kind of plan, it requires 3 total free transfers across the next 10. You can take hits for any of these transfers if you'd like, but obviously we're not recommending taking hits, obviously. But anyways, in game week 8, you've got Saka versus Bournemouth, Haaland versus Wolves. I do know Saka picked up the knock, but if we don't get, any proper declaration 100% that he's going to be 100% out, I would just risk it and play him. You might be tempted to make a premium swap this week, but I'd really just recommend against that because there are 3 midfielders who could all play a very significant role in captaincy across the next 3 to 4, with another week's worth of information being extremely beneficial. That those 3 would be Heung-min Son, Foden, and Palmer. And I also think all 3, they've got better entrance points next week, right? Like if you entered into Son this week, you would get West Ham away with a doubt of minutes. Foden, you get Wolves, but Southampton's the one you really want. And Palmer, obviously Liverpool away this week, but you could be investing on a Newcastle at home next week. So in this path, the big strength that you have is you get to keep Haaland across the next 10. In game week 9, you move Saka to Cole Palmer. Saka's got Liverpool, Palmer has Newcastle, so better entrance point, as we said. And you're moving to Cole early because later down the line, when he has Leicester in 12, Villa in 13, and Southampton in 14, you're definitely going to want Palmer. So this swap is more of a long-term premium swap, kind of locking in your captains in the future. If Son does emerge as an option sometime from game weeks 9 to 11, the best time to move for him will be in game week 11 when Son has Ipswich and Palmer has Arsenal. So it's not the worst fixture for Palmer, but Son's is much, much better, and Son's also a captaincy option in that week. If you have a lot of value tied into Cole and maybe you just want to cap Haaland in game week 11, then you don't really need to do this move and you can just save the transfer. But as of now, I do think that the transfer makes a lot of sense. The final transfer is just to bring Palmer back in 12 onwards. There's other moves you can do instead of a 1 week punt, right? You can go to a Salah if you've got the money. Maybe even if you really like Foden, you can go there. All depends on how many transfers you have and what money you have to play with. The strength in this strategy is that you're getting to Palmer early, then you're deciding whether to engage in more risk, whether to chase those big rank gains or not. But either way, you're staying in a 2 premium setup, right? So your team is a lot stronger overall, and you're less reliant on those big boys to do well. But the downside of staying in this setup is that your captaincy path is a lot weaker than almost all of the other plans I mentioned in this video. You're locked into 2 premium captain options across the next 10 unless you use more of your free transfers on swaps. You do have the ability to make other moves in your team with this plan, and that is a big plus. But if you do, like if you have some fires, you have some spots that you need to change, maybe this is the path for you. Personally, I'm just not the biggest fan of this because you got a lot of threats. No Salah, no Saka, no Son, no Foden, no Watkins or Isak for a while, and all 6 of those guys I do expect to play a big role in captaincy across the next 10 weeks. The next pathway, again, is a Saka Haaland pathway. This is the one I'm liking the most at the moment, definitely my current favorite path. It involves using 90% of your free transfers towards premium swaps, and I also moved to a 3 premium setup later down the line, whilst I still have the squad depth of a 2 premium team. Like the previous one we looked at, this week you obviously roll, keep both of your premiums, get the extra week worth of information, and now it's game week 9. I would sell Saka to buy Phil Foden when Saka faces Liverpool. Foden's got Southampton, so it's a good entrance point. And maybe you're asking me, why not Palmer in game week 9? Like why not Son? Well, that's because Foden is the key to the castle in this path because we are selling Haaland in game week 10. City still have good fixtures game week 10, 11, 12 with Bournemouth, Brighton, Spurs, and you're going to want some City attack. But what Foden gives you, it gives you access into that City attack, into City's fixtures, and when City's fixtures take a turn from game week 13 onwards, when they've got Liverpool, Forest, Palace, Man United, Villa, you sell off Foden. So at that time, I feel much more comfortable not owning Man City assets in that run of fixtures, just because, it means now that I'm chasing big upside against Man City, who will be highly owned assets across that period. Foden has excellent historical records as well against Bournemouth, Brighton, and Tottenham. It's not that I need him to match Haaland every week. I just need him to match or outscore in one of those three and use Foden as a captaincy option. So the plan is very highly dependent on Phil, his expected minutes, and his form. So I bring Foden in 9. I'm getting the best entrance point. And then in 10, I sell Haaland to Cunha, who has Palace and Southampton, I believe, at home, and two great fixtures. And I also upgrade one of my cheap midfielders, which in my case is Semenyo. I go up to Mo Salah because I expect Salah to be a top captaincy prospect for that 3-week spell where he has Brighton, Villa, and then Southampton in 12. And so in game week 12, my plan is also to bring in Ollie Watkins in one of the forward spots. My case would be Calvert-Lewin to Watkins, which highlights the power of premium swaps. I'm giving myself the best chance for captaincy success because I'm planning to own most of the best captaincy options across the next 10 weeks, apart from Haaland, of course. Now that we've made the Watkins move, then it's game week 13, so Salah and Foden play each other. And that's where I would sell Foden to Palmer, and I would sell Salah to Saka to fund that move, right? And so you get Saka for his good run, Palmer for his good run. Entrance point is really nice. West Ham away for Saka, Villa at home for Palmer. And then the final swap in this plan is Watkins to Isak in 16 when Isak has two promoted team fixtures back to back. So as you can see, in this strategy, I'm targeting premium captaincy options. I'm moving off and on certain players dependent on fixtures, and I've got an optimal captaincy matrix in most of the next 10 weeks. Yes, I am without Haaland for 8 weeks, and I'm without Man City attack for 5 weeks, but like I said, I think the fixture block from 13 to 17, I think it's the worst fixture patch Haaland's going to have all season, and if Foden can turn around his form quick for the next couple, he will do a good enough job to protect me from getting smashed, basically. And I'm engaging in risk. I'm chasing upside. But it's logical chasing. It's not just planning to sell Haaland because I feel like it. The other premiums in that fixture patch, they've got favorable fixtures. Watkins, Palmer, Salah. And I believe Haaland will struggle to match what this current structure will do at that time. Obviously, things will change quickly in FPL. We still need to see what Son's minutes look like, whether Foden can actually do the job we need him to do. But as of now, this is my favorite pathway. This next pathway is the final one for the Saka plus Haaland setup. And this one is for people who want to move to a 3 premium structure, but obviously they don't want to sacrifice Haaland. And look, the amount of transfers and where you get the money to upgrade your midfielder spot is different for each manager. So that's something you will need to figure out on your own. I will just show you the pathway, entrance points, exits points, etc. So in this setup, you'd once again hold your horses on moving Saka out. You take the week's worth of info on Son, Foden, and Palmer, and then you'd reevaluate in game week 9. Now, in game week 9, I've got you moving Saka to Palmer for the Newcastle and Man United fixtures. Then in game week 10, you'd do your money moves, whatever it is that you're going to do to get to that midfield, that 3rd premium, and upgrade one of your midfielders to Son Heung-min, which means that for game week 10 and 11, your captaincy options include Son, Palmer, Haaland, which is a very, very strong cap matrix if I do say so myself. Now, in game week 12, when Son has Manchester City, you're going to sell him for Saka. And this is when Arsenal's fixtures start to turn into that really nice patch. Forest, West Ham, Man United, Everton, Palace. Now your captaincy setup is a 3 premium structure, and you have the 2 of the best midfielder options from game week 13 onwards for captaincy. Now, this strategy only requires 4 to 5 transfers across the next 10, and if you have a transfer for luxury moves, you could even think about moving one of the mids to Son in game week 16 when he has Southampton away. Not many transfers used, excellent captaincy matrix for the next 10, and you get Palmer early, and you get to keep Haaland. The only problem with your squad is it's likely to be weaker as a whole. You're heavily reliant on your 3 premiums to perform every week, and you're locked out of moving for a Watkins or Salah in the next 10. But if you value Haaland that much, this is your pathway for sure. We're moving into a completely new structure now. This is for guys who are in a 3 premium setup already. Maybe you have Haaland plus Saka plus Salah, or maybe you have Palmer instead of Saka, or maybe you have Watkins instead of Saka. But basically, this one is Salah plus Haaland and one more premium on top. If your team is set up like any of the ones that I just mentioned above, this pathway is applicable to you. First, let's do a keep Haaland plan. Obviously, you want to stay in a 3 premium setup, which gives you a great captaincy matrix long term. But again, you're going to be heavily reliant on the premiums to do well every week. Your team might also feel a little bit touch unbalanced at times, but I'm sure if you set up like this, you're comfortable and confident in that strategy. So the good thing is you have Mo already. And for me, if you own Mo, he has to stay until at least game week 12. The Brighton fixture, Villa fixture, and Southampton fixture are all prime matchups for Mo, and he will play a massive role in captaincy in those weeks. Again, I wouldn't be doing any swaps this game weeks. Stick with what you got and take another week's worth of info. Now you've rolled the transfer and you're into game week 9. This is where I'd make my first transfer. If you have Palmer or Watkins, do not make this move. I'd keep both until game week 10 at least and look to roll your transfers to prepare for upcoming fixture swings. If you have Saka, I would move him out for a Foden or Son in game week 9, although you can do this move in 10. If Foden is the one you want, then move in game week 9 because you get the best entrance point with the Southampton fixture. If it's Son that you want, you can wait as long as you want to get him, but for sure have him in for the game week 11 Ipswich game. And just be cautious overall how many transfers you need for this strategy. Now, let's say you move for Foden against Southampton in 9. You'd then not need to make a premium swap until game week 13, which is when you'd sell Salah and Foden, using those funds to get to Palmer and Saka for their good fixtures in 13. If you have enough money to do that Foden up to Palmer in 12 and catch that Leicester game away, then that also makes a lot of sense. But again, it's team dependent how many transfers you have and how much money. I do think it's worth missing out on the Palmer Leicester away fixture for a Foden or Son upside in the next 3 to 4 weeks. I really do believe that. And I also like the Villa entrance because you can sell Salah to fund Palmer and Saka if you don't have the money. So you get Palmer and Saka for the good fixtures anyways. And the trend of Palmer plus Saka in for that game week 13 onwards has been a feature in all 3 premium structures you've seen throughout this video. So by the way, if you are enjoying this one, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. But you can see now, just based off the fixtures, owning Saka and Palmer from 13 onwards, it just seems like the optimal play. And I do rate the fixtures. I rate them not only from a points projection perspective, but also from a captaincy perspective as well. You'd also be in a position where you can move to Salah quite easily by downgrading the pair Saka and Palmer and moving to a Foden, a Bruno Fernandes, even a Jared Bowen or something. And so it does give you that flexibility to get back to Salah down the line. And if it just depends if you do plan your free transfers well. Again, the downside to the strategy is that your team will be weaker in some areas, most likely the defense, compared to me, right? I've got a 2 premium squad and it's a lot stronger in other spots, but I don't have 3 premiums. And when I do get to 3, I won't have Haaland. So there's a lot of power in this structure. The captaincy matrix is optimal for sure in the next 10. And it's only 3 transfers across the next 10. Saka to Foden in 9, Salah to Palmer in 13, and Foden back to Saka in 13 as well. This is a differential structure for the same setup that we just looked at in the previous section. So that would be Salah, Saka, Haaland, or Salah, Palmer, Haaland. The good thing about this one is that you can keep Haaland all the way up until game week 13. So unlike me, I don't get to own him for Bournemouth, Brighton, Tottenham, whereas you guys get to, right? So in that in itself is there's big upside in that for sure. So first what you're going to do is you're going to roll in game week 8. Then in game week 9, you have the choice to either sell Saka or Saka to Son or Foden. Let's be a bit different this time. Let's say you move to Son, right? Remember, if you own Palmer or Watkins, I wouldn't advise moving in game week 9 or 10 because I still think the fixtures are really good. But for Palmer, this week is a good time to sell. If you do choose to sell and, he looks incredible, then you're probably going to be kicking yourself, why didn't I hold my horses on Palmer? So that's why I wouldn't be selling Palmer or Watkins in game week 8. The next swap that I would make is Son to Palmer in 12. So Son has City and Palmer has Leicester. So you're buying Palmer at a really nice time, but you'll need around 1 million to move up to Palmer. So make sure you do have the money. If you don't, then roll and make the move in game week 13. In game week 13, you'll have a ton of money because you'd sell Haaland for Watkins, sell Salah for Saka, and when Salah plays City, Saka has West Ham away. Then the final move you'd make is Watkins to Isak in game week 16. It's only 5 moves across the next 10, and you get to keep Salah and Haaland for the remainder of their good fixtures. This gives you a highly optimal captaincy path, 3 premiums, and you are chasing big upside without Haaland and Mo for 5 weeks, only because you'll want Haaland back in game week 18 when he has a good run. The problem is in the weeks when you sell Salah and Haaland, you might have a pretty weak team as your money isn't spread around across multiple positions. Maybe your defense is too weak or your bench is too weak, and that is the big downside to the strat. Your team is going to be less balanced and weak in other areas because you didn't set up that way, right? And it could backfire pretty heavily if Salah and Haaland out does cook you. Because obviously your team was built for a different strategy and you're moving to a new one. But I still like this path because you're engaging in high risk for big gain potential. And if you don't have a good enough squad, you might struggle if a premium backfires and cooks you, basically. But I still think it's a reasonable strategy. If you have enough transfers to improve some of the other spots, you could get to a place where this is kind of optimal for you, and maybe it's an option. The final structure we're going to be taking a look at today is the no Haaland setup. So Salah, Palmer, and Saka. The big pros to this strategy is that Salah becomes your season keep, and you also have the City attack coverage with Foden until game week 13, and your captaincy path is pretty good as well. So in game week 8, I'd sell Palmer or Saka to Foden, most likely Saka due to the injury stuff, but you do need to get to Foden ASAP to get that City coverage. In game week 10, you'd move from Saka to Son when he has those back-to-back home games, Villa at home in 11, and then Ipswich at home in 12. So Son plus Salah is a really great cap matrix 10 and 11, and in game week 12, you'd sell Son to Palmer, so you're getting the good Palmer entrance point, and in 13, you move Foden to Saka for his good fixtures. The only real downside is that you're heavily reliant on Salah, and there's a couple, like maybe it'll be a couple games where, you have to play your premiums through tougher fixtures, but that just depends on how many transfers you actually have. And look, it's really hard to build a perfect captaincy matrix across the next 10 weeks, but Haaland, yeah, he's obviously your biggest threat. And, I'm sure if you've gone without him this long, I'm sure you're not too worried about the next two or game week 10 and beyond. So for sure, the key thing, if you're in the strategy, get to Foden ASAP if you don't have Haaland. And look, I really like this strategy because you get to own Foden and Son for their best fixtures. I mean, most people in the other structures will just be choosing one of those two. So I think it's a really strong strategy. Both of them, two of the lowest owned premiums in the game, and they can gain you a ton of points over the next few weeks. And that's a wrap on this FPL video. If I did help you understand some premium swap theory, then do consider dropping a like on the video and subscribing to my channel. Peace.